All righty, so let's go ahead and kick things off. So thank you everyone for joining today's office hours. As a reminder, this is a recorded session, so only share things that is okay for you and your company to share publicly. And those for both folks that are joining from the Microsoft side and for external folks. As a reminder, the agenda will start with sharing kind of what's new in Semantic Kernel. We have quite a bit that I'm excited to share with all of you, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. All righty. So let me go ahead and share my screen so I can signpost all of the great things that we're going to be talking about during today's office hours. Okay, so first, what is new from Semantic Kernel? So yesterday, 2 days ago, actually, we posted our spring 2024 roadmap for Semantic Kernel. It's all the things that I've already discussed on our community call, so none of this should be really new for folks on this call if you're a participant that comes frequently to this thing. There's, of course, getting parity across all of our different languages. That's, of course, Python and Java. We have a bunch of connectors that we want to go ahead and get added, both across AI connectors, so things like Gemini, Llama. And it looks like we have to mute someone. Let's see. Let's go ahead and mute Stefano. Great. And then first-class agent support. So we've been talking about how important agents are. That is something that'll be coming over the next several months. Okay. I highly recommend watching the video where I deep dive into all of these topics, and you can kind of get excited about what is coming. So again, if you haven't checked that out, I'm going to go ahead and post that in the chat so that all of you can read it and watch the video to see what's coming next. So that's number one. So we have a roadmap. It's now available. You can check it out. You can share it with all of your friends and families. The next thing I want to share with you is very soon, I just did a quick check. We'll be releasing 1.4 of Semantic Kernel. And then probably tomorrow we'll have a blog post of kind of the top new features that are part of it. What's probably most exciting for me is Azure OpenAI support for their assistance API. So today we only really support the OpenAI flavor of the assistance. We're going to be bringing support for Azure as well. So folks that are using Azure, you trust kind of how we use your data. You'll be able to use that in either today or tomorrow. And the other thing that I'm really excited about is in the new connector space, we also want to make sure that we deliver new modalities within Semantic Kernel. So we'll also be adding connectors to text to audio and audio to text. So even internally, we've been starting to have some fun demos where we can talk to these AIs and have it do things for us. Those will be coming soon so that you can be building those into your own applications. Okay. So expect the version number of our NuGet package to go up to 1.4 in the next day or so, and accompanying blog on Thursday. Stefano, you have your hand raised.
Hi all, hi everyone. One quick question: that new Semantic Kernel version is for production, or is some preview or alpha? I mean, is it stable that version?
So the version that we have for .NET is at a stable release. There are some features that we still mark as experimental that require you to add pragmas. That's kind of our way of communicating that those APIs, those interfaces may change. But the core guts of Semantic Kernel, what you need to actually build an application that calls functions and automates work for you, that is stable and you can release into production.
Thank you. And one last question. If I want to develop a plugin, there is like some standard process to have a folder, the actual function and the prompt in a TXT. Is it possible to have a way to load dynamically that prompt? Because we need to like make some tweaks, some tuning. Is there a way to create plugins with dynamic prompt without a file? Is that possible?
So short answer, yes. Let's plan on making that the first question we get to when we get to Q&A. We can talk about how we can kind of make that more of a dynamic process for you. Cool.
Thank you so much.
For sure. The last thing I want to share with all of you is we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of feedback saying, okay, great. We're super excited that Semantic Kernel is now using dependency injection. Hooray. I can now use it inside of my production apps like any other service that I'm used to and know and love. But how? As many of you know, if you're in the .NET space, there's many different ways of skinning a cat when it comes to dependency injection. And so a lot of y'all have been kind of leaning on us of, hey, what is the actual best way of doing it? So at the end of this week, we'll be sharing a sample. And I'll go ahead and just share the current progress that we're at. This is the current PR. We're trying to create a sample that is very easy to understand. It's just a simple home automation sample where we have like a light plugin and a time plugin so that you can do things like say, hey, turn on the lights at some period of time. But probably the most important bit is how do you actually add all of these services together? And to give y'all kind of a sneak peek of what we are going to be recommending to folks kind of moving forward is kind of patterns where you define all of your required services. So here you can see we're creating a iChat completion service to Azure OpenAI as a singleton. So create all of your services as singletons. That also goes for all of your loggers and HTTP handlers. And then also add all of your plugins as potentially singletons or transients, what you need them to be, right? So here we're adding your time plugin to your host, your lights to your host. And then when you want to create your kernels or when you want to create your agents, you can then add them as transients. We get this question all the time. Should the kernel be a transient or a singleton? We're recommending transient just so that you always get a fresh kernel every single time you want it. And then you can go ahead and add the necessary plugins to that kernel for that kernel's job. So you can see here we have a home automation agent where we want to give it everything, the time and the lights. And then we might have a simpler agent that only needs one or two of the plugins, right? So this will be publishing in the next few days. We hope this helps folks. If you already use DI, how to use DI with Semantic Kernel. What we're also learning is a lot of folks are starting with AI for the first time and they're not familiar with dependency injection in the .NET space. So we also hope this is a good way of learning how to use DI for the first time with Semantic Kernel. Okay. So those are the main updates that I have from the Semantic Kernel side. Before we open it up to open questions and jump to Stefano's question about these dynamic prompts, are there questions from the rest of the community on kind of what we just shared about what we are just now sharing? And thank you, Evan, for dropping in some additional links in the chat for our releases and our Python kernel roadmap. All righty. Well, there's no questions with kind of what's new. Then let's go ahead and transition to the best part, the Q&A. It sounds like Stefano has one question already, so we'll go ahead and jump on that. And then it looks like Jivan already has his hand up. My ask is go ahead and start pasting in questions in the chat. Raise your hand if you have them, and then we can start burning through down the questions.
Yeah, and Pradeep also has a question in the chat.
Ah, perfect. Okay, so the first one is dynamic prompts. Okay, so I got some of what you were asking, but if Stefano, if you want to come off mute and kind of describe your scenario a little bit more again, then we can figure out how we can get you unblocked.
Thank you. The idea, we have developing an AI application, so we are leveraging RAG pattern, and the idea is to have some plugins in the planner that actually solve our things, but we are like having metrics. We want to use prompt flow. We need to have the whole LLM life cycle with metrics and everything, and we need to fine tune the prompts. So we need to have maybe a structure, a repository with, let's say, copilot types. So if we work with the copilot type, let's say A, it works with some prompts, maybe some plugins. So we need to have side by side multiple versions of the actual plugins. So we need a way to dynamically load the prompt based on a configuration and not having the prompt in a file like hard code, because that is deployed and we need to make changes. Meanwhile, is being used in testing.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So it sounds like if let's just go to our docs real quick. But as you called out, you can, if you want to, serialize your prompts as files. So if we go to, we have this nice little YAML format where you can provide your templates and some of the settings. What I'm hearing from you is, hey, you actually will probably want to do like some A/B testing. You want to do testing to figure out like what prompts, what settings are actually the best before you actually kind of lock it down into maybe like a serialization, right? So to do this, there's a couple different approaches. One, of course, is you could have like multiple different files for all these different prompts, and you could have some configuration that dynamically loads in the right one. That may be a lot of overhead, right? So if you don't want to go down that route, kind of what we show in the, let's see, let's actually just open up this solution right here. We do provide methods on top of the kernel for you to just like invoke any prompt that you give it, right? So what I would imagine you would do is you would have some sort of configuration up at the top that would pull in that information from wherever you're storing these different options, A, B, C. Your configuration to choose which one to actually use, and then you could use the actual like raw APIs to actually invoke the prompts without having to go down the serialization route. What's nice is even when you do use this approach, and I think we even have one. Let's see, maybe we don't.
But the thing is that if we do it in that, we are not using like the planner, because manually we are invoking that prompts. How we could like load that prompt from external repository, but use the planner and not explicitly invoke that prompt?
Not explicitly invoke that prompt. Are you having the planner dynamically choose which prompts to call? Is that right?
Yes. Actually, we want to use
got it.
the planner to choose the right plugin, but actually that plugin has dynamic prompt and not a hard code file. That's the thing.
Okay. In that case, you might, this might be a good use of the sample that we're pulling together. So in this sample, you can kind of see how when we're building the kernel, we're actually deciding which plugins to use, and it's transient, so you get a fresh one every single time. One thing I could see y'all doing is as you actually build the kernel, you could add logic to check flight that the user is in A, B, or C, and then you could add into the plugin collection the prompts that you want to actually have based on what version the user's on. So that could be one route of like dynamically changing it using dependency injection. The other, so that's if you need to like actually change the prompt template for each user as they come in to actually test which one is better or worse. So check that out. The other thing I'd recommend is once you've kind of figured out the prompt, I suspect you'd also want to update the execution settings, like what temperature to use and what penalties you
fine
want to.
tune that. Yes.
Yeah, so if you want to also kind of update that information as well, let me just pull up sample. We do have this other thing called an AI service selector. Service selector, custom service selector. Okay, I want to paste this in the chat. And then we'll probably have to move to someone else's question. This is kind of the most important code right here. This is a pretty simple scenario where what it does is it will serve up a particular model with GPT. That is not what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is actually change the different settings. Get service selector. Okay. I think this is, here we go. But one of the things that you're able to do when you build a custom service selector is you can, by its name, actually decide which service to actually return back. For you, you might not need to change that unless you want to test things like, oh, for this user, we want to try 3.5 turbo, and this other one, we want to try 4. But you can also update and change the service settings dynamically. And this is really powerful because what this means is you have one spot in your code where you can add this logic that allows you to dynamically change both the model and the settings for that model so that you can start playing around and testing all of your different prompts. Okay.
That's nice. I got it. So to recap, in order to have like dynamic prompts, one way is to load it and use the kernel to invoke that prompt directly built without using the file. But in that way, we are like explicitly calling the plugin and not using the planner. So the other way is to like have multiple version of the plugin, and when we are building the kernel based on some configuration, we like set the dependency to the one we want based on that configuration. But at the end, there's no way to dynamically change the plugin's prompt. No, we need to have some of those like defined and choosing the one to be registered dynamically, or invoking a one that is built from external configuration. But those are the options, right?
Yes, and I guess if I'd add one more option to your plethora of things that you could try out, it is if you build a native plugin, like let's look at this light thing. You know, it turns on, turns off, etc. You could imagine another function inside of this plugin that is like, I don't know, generate email. And inside of that function, you actually want to call a prompt. You could, since you're now writing native code, you could dynamically author your prompt in this native plugin that you then inject inside of your planner. So that's one additional place where you could kind of customize this information.
Okay, so when the plugin is being executed, it dynamically gets the prompt to actually solve that execution. Oh, that's really nice. Thank you so much for your advice.
Cool. Alrighty, so let's go to the next hand raise. That's Javon. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, please correct me.
Yeah, man, it's Jeevan. Yeah, you're pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question was mainly around, right? Let's say we have an open AI spec plugin, right, which is being used in the context of an agent, right? How would love to kind of hear from the team what is the recommendation on the authentication authorization model over there, right? Especially if we want to do something like an OAuth on behalf of Flow, right? So some examples or some samples would be great. So want to kind of, that was my question.
Yes, let me see if I can find the sample. I think this might be the sample. No, that's not it. I might have to follow up, but I'll kind of describe at high level kind of
Sure.
how you do it. Okay, authentication for OpenAI plugins.
Yeah, and that's within the context of the agent, right? Agent slash assistant.
Okay, so I guess before we get to the agent piece, at a high level, semantic kernel kind of stays out of the authentication game. We try to kind of leverage the default patterns that folks already have kind of within .NET, and through our bear hug adoption of dependency injection, this makes it a little bit easier. So the patterns that we recommend for folks is you would create a custom or an overrided HTTP handler that actually has all of your authentication logic inside of it. That would be injected into our import functionality for OpenAI plugins. And whenever your OpenAI plugin is actually called, we would just use your HTTP handler that has its authentication, and we kind of like make sure that that works, right? So that's kind of the high level of how that works. For some reason, I'm having trouble finding the actual sample that actually demonstrates how to do this. Maybe I follow up afterwards and try to get that for you. The interesting thing for me is the second bit, what you're calling for agents. I'd say what most people are doing today, and what I would recommend for folks if they're building agents today, is exactly as you described. Use kind of a more of a on behalf of kind of experience. So if it's a co-pilot where the experience is like in line with the user's experience and they're using it, that's pretty trivial, right? You already have the user's token. You can just reuse that for any request that the agent needs to do. It gets a little bit harder if the agent is autonomous. So the user asks the agent to do something, they walk away from their screen, they close everything down, and the agent's still supposed to be acting autonomously in the server. What the semantic kernel team is doing right now is we've been told that APIM actually supports for Microsoft products being able to store a token and keep it alive on the server side so that it can be used by an agent. We're still kind of ironing out the specifics of that. I would expect in the next like 2 or 3 weeks, we'll have a conclusion of how to actually make that possible, and we'll open source kind of a sample to show how that's done. So keep an eye out for that. But we've been told that it is possible. If you want to go ahead and try it before we actually get it done, we'd love to hear about your experience and your results. And the last thing that I guess I'd share with you is the other area that we're exploring. Besides just using the user's token and using it on behalf of, we're also curious about giving agents their own identities. So what if an agent has its own principal, that it can have docs that are shared to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is still early days, but that's also an area that we're interested in pursuing to see if that provides additional capabilities to these agents that a user token doesn't. So I'll take a pause there and see if that kind of answered your question, or if there are other areas that you wanted me to hit on.
Yeah, I think it was mainly from an approach perspective, right? That's what we wanted to kind of get some thought from the team. And what I kind of heard, and just to kind of quickly summarize, is again to your point, right? You're definitely looking at on behalf of flows, and again, classic scenario is hey, you're doing some RAG stuff, and it needs to kind of there's a plugin there which is being called within the context of an agent. So I need my identity to be propagated all the way down to that plugin when the agent decides to call that plugin, so that it knows that hey, it is so and so who's calling in. So if I in this particular scenario, which I kind of laid out, if I understood right, your recommendation is, at least right now, go in for a custom kind of HTTP handler to kind of look at the plugin and then kind of make that determination and do that call. Yeah, correct. Is that accurate?
That is spot on. Yes. Yeah. For just simple RAG, yeah, you should be completely set with creating a custom HTTP handler, passing that into your plugin, and you should be good to go.
All right, yeah, and we are potentially kind of looking at what is out of the box, right, from .NET in terms of OAuth authentication, etc., to do that flow and the dance, right, and kind of integrate that along with the agent thing. That's directionally where we are looking at, in terms of Explore. So just want to kind of make sure that we are on the right track.
Yes, and if you use another library, again, this is the beauty of dependency injection. Just register the service, inject it into your plugin, then it'll have access to that information to perform that authentication.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Cool, great question. All righty, next we have Pradeep, and I think you posted your question in the chat, if I remember correctly. We currently use the save reload feature of the handlebars planner. We found that the handlebars planner doesn't deal well with missing inputs in the user question as well as the function calling planner. Now, that's true. But it doesn't have save reload functionality. Can we expect to see this feature? Yeah, Pradeep, I guess like real quick, what type of scenario are you trying to light up where you're running into this?
So this one, I think when we spoke last time, we actually had very good success with caching and reusing plans, right? So now what you've started doing is we do a RAG on the, or we do a similarity search on the user query. And if it sort of matches a baseline query, we take the same plan, we reuse it, right? So phenomenal performance improvement. But now, let's say the question.
Sorry, I got excited.
The question we have, for example, let's say I'm asking a question like, what is the firm outlook? The actual question was, what is the firm outlook, let's say on Microsoft, right? Let's say forgot to provide on Microsoft. I just had a partial question. The function was actually correctly prompts you, you're missing this input, right? And then the user can actually take that feedback and do the handleback sort of chokes. But we really like the caching and reloading features of it, right? So we are wondering, how do we kind of get the best of both worlds?
That is a good question. One that I don't know if I have a good answer immediately. I think what your initial question in the chat, kind of like, hey, could we also have kind of like save reload plans for the sequential planner? No, we've kind of talked about that. We don't have anything concrete on our roadmap yet. And I guess having your scenario, and if you could file as an issue, will kind of help us actually like make it more concrete and help prioritize it.
So we can post the exact one, how the handlebar is sort of returning the response, so that will help you.
Yes. So yeah, if you don't mind creating issue and kind of describing some of your scenarios, the thing that I'm glad you're bringing a scenario to us is I want to make sure that if we do provide save reload of sequential planner plans, that you don't run into the exact same challenge that you have today, where the plan is this hard-coded thing and it's kind of brittle, right? If you don't have all the inputs exactly right, it just won't work. So what I'm hearing from your requirements is, yes, we want to save and reload plans for the sequential planner, but we also want some of that latent flexibility that's in the sequential planner, and we don't want to lose that. So having kind of the best of both worlds, I think we'll have to kind of noodle on it from the Semantic Kernel team. But I'm excited to kind of start doing some brainstorming sessions, because it's a very
and on that very related question is, today we have because the handlebar plan is sort of specific to input, we wrote our own function to generate a template out of it. So, and you had mentioned in the last call there were plans to offer this out of the box, right? So do you want us to create an issue, or it's already in the backlog?
So it might actually be rolling out tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to
caveat it.
I want to caveat it. We did like a partial solution so far. We haven't like done the full thing. Let's see if I can find it real quick. The configurable handlebars planner prompt. Yay! I think this is the one. Yep, this is one. Okay, so I would say we've partially solved it. So one of the new things that you'll be able to do once this rolls out either today or tomorrow is you'll now be able to pass in a kernel arguments to the handlebars planner. And when you do that, that will actually add into the prompt. Let's see if we can find that section. Arguments. We're going off the deep end. I have to reel myself back. Handlebars planner. Let's open up this file. I think the examples are in here. Okay, so what you can do is you can create some arguments that you pass into the handlebars planner. And what it will do is it'll actually treat these as dynamic input variables, right? And so we'll actually write a prompt that will reuse some of these elements. So let's see, where's like a good example? Person. Here, right here. So what would happen is if you pass in a different set of initial arguments that are a different person, we'll actually update the plan so that it provides the right input.
Okay. So
Now,
I don't have to necessarily templatize it. I can use the sort of static plan, but it'll understand where it has to make the substitution.
Yes, but that only works today. That only works if you pass it in as initial arguments. The thing that still isn't done is if you include information within the actual goal, within the prompt. So maybe it's like, write a poem about Valentine's Day, right? And you want Valentine's Day to be the thing that's dynamic. That still ends up getting hard-coded into the handlebars prompt. And we have some follow-up work to figure out how do we actually make that piece dynamic as well. But if you pass in things through kernel arguments, it should be dynamic moving forward.
Okay. We will definitely try it out. And this is 1.4, is it?
It should be in 1.4, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, and please create that issue so that we can follow up on the save reload of sequential planes.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, let's go to Stephen, and you also pasted in your question in the chat, but if you want to come off mute and kind of speak to it.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? My mic okay?
We sure can.
Cool. Anyway, first off, thanks, Matthew. I appreciate you doing this. One question I had, so, and correct me if I'm in the wrong place here, I'm working with kernel memory mainly. And so essentially my issue that I'm running into is my use case for our users is essentially log on to a page, have a chat bin, have some documents on the right, ask questions about those documents, right? And so the pages are usually going to be, they're going to be in PDFs, anywhere from like 200 to 400 pages. So they're like very complex bridge inspection documents. That's our sort of our business area. And the issue, so with semantic kernel, without kernel memory, you could easily chunk things manually and assign metadata to them, like keys or to memories, I mean. And so I love using kernel memory so far has been awesome. The API has been great. And I'm just looking for a way to easily like chunk the memories and keep track of what specific page they were on. So say if I have a 500-page PDF and I want to know about some calculated deck area, that's like a bridge term. And so that answer is on page 400. If it's a very straightforward answer, I would hope, in the citation, it could tell me where in the document it actually found that. It would be so useful for our users. And so I've been doing it, a little hacky solution. I've been augmenting the actual text itself, which is not great because you have to tell the prompts to ignore this bracket of text at the beginning of each line. But I was wondering if you had any ideas or any way to use kernel memory and semantic kernel together to sort of make this a better solution.
So if you are using kernel memory, just as an FYI, we do have different support agreements is the wrong word, but like way of
I figured.
supporting objects.
Yep, I figured that was possible.
Is not supported to the level as semantic kernel. I just want to make sure that's known. But
Yes.
if you are independent it, you should. I believe there's a way of actually taking that service and exposing it as a plugin. And if you do that, you can bring it inside of semantic kernel as a plugin, and they can like retrieve data from the index. So I'd recommend trying that.
Okay.
If you, guess what would be the next thing I'd recommend? If you have all this like additional like context or metadata on like what page it is or paragraph and all that stuff, you can also try to store that in like, I believe there's like a metadata field that is available inside of our connectors. It may or may not exist. I know we're working on trying to fix it, so I may be living in the future a bit. But storing it as an additional column inside of your vector DB or your index may also help. I guess the last thing I'd recommend is you may end up wanting to use kind of the Azure AI. Are you using Azure AI Search? Is that the service you're using?
No, I'm not. I'm just using. No, I'm not using that yet.
What are you using as your vector DB? Or
I'm just using the simple file storage right now.
Oh, you're just using simple file storage.
Yeah, I mean this is very early stages. I'm just playing with the bare bones kernel memory stuff. So I haven't decided on that yet.
So what I have seen a lot of success with is because the memory space is so complex, the customers that I've seen have more success are the ones that kind of offload some of the complexity to services. So in Microsoft's Azure AI Search. So it might not be a bad idea to just like give AI Search just like kick the tires a bit. It does do some of like the stuff that like kernel memory does. Like one of the reasons we built kernel memory so that we could provide feedback to those teams. So you may end up being able to get more bang for your buck if you just like dived right into kind of a service that starts to manage for you.
Okay. So look at the Azure AI service, search service, and look into using the kernel memory as a plugin to semantic kernel. That's sort of the takeaway. Okay.
Yep.
Well, cool. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you answering that.
All righty. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Ion, I'll get to you, but I also want to give some love to folks in the chat. So Jeffrey asks, I have a bit of an esoteric issue, or maybe off topic. I have an app that's using OTel to log events. I noticed that downstream processing of the plugins are now able to get the current active span, making it difficult to get visibility on the processing of the function call skmade. Okay, I think the issue is that semantic kernels invoke a sync uses configure await false, causing it to lose the necessary context for the tracer. I have a kind of a janky workaround. My ask, Jeffrey, I don't think I'll be able to answer it in this call, but this does sound like something that we want to address. One of our main goals with semantic kernel is to make sure it's very enterprise friendly. Logging is of course a key part of that. If you don't mind creating an issue for us on GitHub, I can make sure that this is prioritized and either we adopt your janky workaround within semantic kernel, or we might have to do some more open heart surgery to remove these configure await clauses. Alrighty. And Jordan asks, our existing reference architecture talks about using APIM in front of multiple OpenAI instances for load balancing, etc. This was all predicated on the services being stateless. Now that the assistance API is coming along, it is explicitly stateful. How should we change our guidance to customers that are wanting to load balance between multiple OpenAI instances? Oh boy, that is a toughie. I am probably the wrong person to ask because I'm a PM and I don't. This is the type of thing I pass off to our engineering team. So I don't know if someone on our engineering team has any good questions or answers. I should say. Reasons like this, though, is one of the reasons why we want to build an agent abstraction that allows you to bring any service or any model to semantic kernel so that you can build your own kind of assistance API. We're in the progress of that, and over the next month we'll have that shipped. But one of my goals is that should actually give you, the developer, the flexibility to have a stateless text completion service, and then use your own load balancing rules and technology to combine that with your documents, with your chat history, and all these other different pieces. And the goal of Semantic Kernel is provide you that flexibility while still having an API that's as simple and easy to use as the Assistance API. So I'd say take a look at that. I unfortunately don't have a good answer on how to actually load balance these things. I can definitely see this becoming more and more of an issue, especially with like global deployments. Anyone on the Semantic Kernel team have any like initial thoughts?
But if you're using the Assistance API in Azure, even if you're load balancing, because the thread should be the same, even if you're hitting different instances of OpenAI for your like GPU processing. So that might be one thing to look at. I wonder if the thread will be resilient across the load balancing that APIM will do in the front.
That is a good. Yes. So when you call the Assistance API, you can you pass in all these IDs. One of the things you can change dynamically at runtime is the model that's used. So you might not be able to easily like switch between different geos for the thread, like that's probably locked into a particular area or service, but you may be able to actually load balance the models. And with Semantic Kernel, our abstraction, our integration with the Assistance API allows you to easily change which service you want to use. So that might be an option for at least load balancing on which model you want. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to Ion. You have your hand raised and see what your question is. And you're muted if you're trying to say something. Okay. So Ion, if you are able to figure out your mic situation, feel free to just come off mute and holler. Steve asked, anyone tried function calling with the Mistral model and Semantic Kernel yet? Wonder if function calling will work with other models besides OpenAI. Over on the Semantic Kernel team, we're trying to get some additional model support. I think Mistral is kind of at the top of our list, so that we can do some of this testing. If any of you in the community end up doing some initial testing, we'd love to hear kind of what the function calling support looks like for other models. I know there's a Llama 2 model on Hugging Face that theoretically has function calling. I actually didn't know Mistral had function calling, so that might bump it up on our list so that we can start validating some of the patterns that we've had. Okay. Let's just keep going. Jose asks, more on handlebars. Regarding handlebars prompt template not being able to parse a JSON object and loop on it, and a JSON generator prompt not being able to generate JSON when used inside a handlebars prompt. What is the suggested estimate? Should we at the moment? I'm just going to pull up these issues real quick, make sure I'm familiar with them. Loops each not working at the moment, but tries to do so. Am I still sharing my screen? No, let's go ahead and share my screen so we know what we're looking at. Let's just handle bars questions. The first one, array not working at the moment to accumulate the results of the loop and array. But tries to do so over complex object by one of the functions in a JSON array. So I'm going to actually have to follow up with Mark to learn more about what these are referring to. If you pass in a complex object inside of a handlebars template, you can use the each statement to loop over it. I think this might be something specific to maybe JSON and how the array gets passed into the each loop. That's my guess. But you should, if you have an array as a kernel argument that should work. And then, oh, this is one that you've created, Jose, on same plugin behaves differently inside a prompt template execution. So we are still looking at this one. Oh, and I promised you to get you a sample of this works. So I apologize for not getting that out sooner. I think I have some time later today. So I can
Absolutely. Don't apologize, please. I mean, you're doing and your team a great job. So thanks for getting that done. I will try what you suggest, and yep, I'll ping you. I will mention that if an array does work.
Perfect. Yeah, my guess is Mark is referring to something in the handlebars planar instead of the handlebars template engine. But yeah, I need to follow up with him. Okay. And then Alessandro asked, the kernel memory sample 201 goes over adding a custom handler, but how do you specify where the pipeline that handler will be used? I see you can pass in the step name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, I'm not the biggest expert when it comes to the kernel memory project. I'm just going to take a quick look to see if Devis is on the call. I don't think he is. We may have to do a follow-up. Or you might have to create an issue on the kernel memory project to get a quick answer, Alessandro. And I saw Ion just rejoined the call. Ion, are you able to ask your question now? No, maybe.
I think he dropped.
Yeah, he dropped. Okay. Ion's having issues with this chat. Okay, let's see. I'll admit him one more time. Ion, if you're having issues, you can drop your question in the chat and we can try to get it answered. Okay. And I'm just running through the chat one more time. I think I was able to get most all of the questions answered. If not, please come off mute and let me know if I missed something.
Here we go, excuse me. So I've got an issue with my mic. So congrats for your great work. And actually, for our solution, we're considering a direction scenario. So how would you compare Llama Index with Semantic Kernel for ingestion pipeline to synthesizing results process? So I'm referring to the query engine for embedding, storing, indexing, retrieving, and evaluating data. Also, do you have any plans actually to address the support and implementation for a knowledge graph engine, maybe for semantic tagging and chunk optimization? So it's divided on two level, two stage weight question.
So this is a great question. I love this question. So the goals of Semantic Kernel and Llama Index are I would say they're actually fairly different. So Llama Index is basically helping you build a custom search engine. So as you kind of mentioned, it helps you like bring in data, chunk it up, kind of build these like knowledge graphs so that at the end of the day, when you actually want to like perform a query, you can get and retrieve the right information. Semantic, so that's like, I want to build a search engine. Semantic Kernel is, I want to build an agent or some sort of automation that calls native code. So I want, in the simplest case, an agent that turns on a light bulb, to a more complex case, hey, I have a mortgage that needs to be processed, and I need an agent to go through every single step of that process in order to send emails to the client, put in information into forms, get signatures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's much more functional, right? And actually, the story that we want to start telling is these two products, these two SDKs can actually be used together instead of being kind of seen as competition to each other, since they are in such very different swim lanes. So the recommendation I give for folks is if you do need to do very, very complex RAG and services like AI search are just not sufficient for you, the best kind of SDK out there to support that is Llama Index, right? And so use Llama Index if you want to build those complex knowledge graphs and semantic searching, blah, 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 right? And then once you have that completed, and you can easily type in a little field and ask a question from Llama Index and get an answer back, you can then feed that information as a plugin into Semantic Kernel, so that your agent that is trying to complete a mortgage process can now use that information, use that custom search engine as a plugin, so that it can actually automate and do work on behalf of the user. So that's how I would see those two products, how they differ and how you can use them together. Don't expect that we would try to take all of the goodness of Llama Index and try to like bake it into Semantic Kernel. We will likely not do that. And if anything, we're starting conversations within Microsoft to say, like, is there any appetite for creating like a .NET version of Llama Index? In my opinion, this is just Matthew speaking at this point, that would be the most preferable route kind of going forward, so that we can get all of the goodness of Llama Index in the .NET ecosystem without us having to like reinvent the wheel.
Thank you.
Cool. Did I answer your question, hopefully?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, perfect. Cool. All right, I'm going to do a quick time check. We have 5 minutes left, so we probably have time for one more question if anyone wants to kind of lob one at me. Otherwise, I'm just going to stall for a couple seconds. Oh, we have one more. Jose, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, take the chance. So, you know me. Question is agents, AutoGen. So I know that's not yet on the timeline. So you mentioned several times AutoGen is going .NET and is going to be with Semantic Kernel. So this is also on the build timeline, or it's not yet specified?
Yeah, so to be more specific, our aspirations are that we all use the same abstractions. There hasn't been like a signed agreement or anything like that, but we are starting conversations with the teams. I do not want to speak to the team building the .NET AutoGen SDK, since they're not on the call, and
Yep.
that would be unfair to me. But I guess like the goal is to get this stuff used so that other teams can start using it within Microsoft fairly soon. So I'll let y'all kind of like read between the lines on some of this stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, if you actually go to the AutoGen, I want to go ahead and share it with you right now.
The Discord, there is a meetup or meeting on next Tuesday, probably.
Yeah, potentially, yes. Let me just pull AutoGen. If you ever want to see kind of the progress of the .NET flavor of AutoGen, there is a .NET folder. I think it's pretty empty at this point. So what you
There
really
is a
want to
pull
do is,
request since last year, but mostly I check it and it's a direct port of Python. So
yes. So Little Cloud, they're an engineer in .NET. So we've been working with him, and kind of the next steps is what we realized in our last conversation was that the first thing that we need to align on are actually the content types. So what is a message? What is an image? What is a insert type here? So that's where I would expect the first kind of updates to this PR, so that it starts using some pieces of Semantic Kernel. I think it already uses some elements of Semantic Kernel for like the function calling pieces. And over time, I would expect it to adopt more and more of the libraries.
I saw some similarities, but not really using any reference to Semantic Kernel.
That is correct. So we're still in conversation
Yeah.
phase, how to actually make that happen. So over the next like couple weeks, month, is when I'd expect those changes start to appear.
And I don't know if I can do a follow-up on that question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Then the other thing is agents as microservices. Do you have in mind, or have you discussed, or there is any idea on, or ideas how to approach that? Because I found this entry in your blog pretty interesting. The idea of similarity to microservice, it's an agent, so you can scale them horizontally. That sounds really sweet.
Yeah. So I guess the TLDR is that create each agent as a service, and it has an API endpoint for like receive text and output text back, you can wrap that in an OpenAI plugin, right? And then import it into another agent or another kernel, right? So that's kind of the future that we see is, of course, you can have these agents living on a single service and they can talk to each other that way. But if you express them as separate services and wrap them in HTTP endpoints, you can use the existing OpenAI import functionality in Semantic Kernel to allow these things to actually start talking.
All right. Thanks a ton.
Cool. All righty. Thanks, y'all. Well, with that, we are at time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again for everyone for joining the call. I highly appreciate it. And I'll see y'all next week. All right. Cheers, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.